Hey guys, and welcome to another Ask Me Anything episode. This is the part of Sound School where you ask us questions. We try to give you the relatively smart answers. And as usual, I'm here with Alexia.
Hello.
How you doing, Alexia?
I'm doing just fine. What about you?
I'm doing great. So we have a great question today from Lisiani. Hey, Lisiani.
Hey, Lisiane.
Alexia, do you want to read this question for us?
Yeah. So she is asking the following question. My question is not about pronunciation, but it's something that bothers me for a long time. I believe that I know relatively
Relatively.
Yeah, relatively well the grammar about past perfect and present perfect. But in terms of speaking, I never know how and when I should use it. And every time I think I should use it, I end up choosing to simplify using the simple verb for the simple verb form to avoid making a mistake. So, do you have some recommendations and or tips special for brazucas to make it easier for me?
Okay, awesome. That's a great question. Thank you, Lisiani. I don't know if I have any super secret tips just for brazucas, but we can try to help you out. So, from my understanding, this question is essentially about the past perfect and the present perfect, and the fact that Lisiani does not feel super comfortable using these verb forms in conversation. Is that the way you understood it?
Yes, exactly. Because I do that a lot as well.
Yeah, I think it's totally normal. I catch myself doing this in Portuguese all of the time when I kind of know how to say something correctly, but I'm not very comfortable with it. So I end up just using a more simple way to say something or just a different way completely. So I totally relate. I think Alexia can too. And I think a good place to start is just giving a brief explanation about what is the past perfect and what is the present perfect.
Okie dokie.
Okay. So, Alexia, I know you remember this, but let me let me save you and give you just a brief explanation. So, the present perfect is when we are using the verb to have and then a past participle. So we are using have or has and then a past participle. So it's a lot easier with examples. So, for example, I have studied a lot recently, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we could use something like I have run a lot in the last 2 weeks. Can you try to give me an example using that same structure?
I have or I had?
I have. Right now, we're talking about the present perfect. If you say I had, that's the past perfect.
Okay. So I have eating a lot of chocolate these days. I have been drinking a lot of water because it's too dry.
Yeah. Okay. So when you
I
say
have
I
been
have been,
drinking. No, it's a continuous action. So I am wrong.
yeah. So what you're using is the present perfect continuous. And that's just when we use the same thing, but we say I have been, and then we use the gerund, the ing form. So instead of I have studied a lot, we would say I have been studying a lot. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I know they're pretty similar, a little bit confusing. So let me try to explain a little bit. So we use the present perfect tense. This is I have studied when we are talking about something that happened in the past, but it's still relevant right now in the present. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the easiest way to think about this is I always think, okay, why do you need to use the past perfect or the present perfect? Why does it exist? Because if something happened in the past, can't we just use the simple past and say, I studied? And most of the time you can, but there are specific situations when it doesn't make that much sense. So, for example, if I said, Alexia, are you nervous about your exam tomorrow? And you could say, no, I'm not nervous. I have studied a lot.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You're talking
Yes.
about something you did in the past, but it's still very relevant to the situation.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Okay. So that's the present perfect. We are using have or has and the participle. The past perfect, it's very similar, but we are using had and then the past participle. So instead of I have studied, we say I had studied.
Like it's
Okay.
done and it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah. So we use the past perfect to talk about something that already happened and it happened in the past before something else that happened in the past. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So again, I think it's very useful to compare this to the simple past. So you could say, I studied for the exam. End of story, right?
Right.
But if you say, I had studied for the exam, but then I got very nervous on the day of the exam. So we are talking about something in the past that happened, and then we're talking about another thing in the past that happened. So the two things are connected, but they're both in the past. Does that make sense?
More or less. I mean, what's it? I still don't know the difference.
Yeah. So for example,
But it's a very, very tiny difference, right? Because one is still relevant, but it's in the past, and the other is in the past and it's completed, but it doesn't mean that it's not as relevant as the other one.
yeah, I think that's a great point that these are very small differences. So, two important things to remember. Number one, most of the time, it's totally fine just to use the simple past. Even if it's not like the most eloquent way to express yourself, most of the time it's grammatically fine, and native speakers will not understand the difference or they will not think it's weird. So that's a good thing to think about. And also, in Lisiani's question, she said, I know relatively well the grammar. And just explaining these very like small differences between the grammar, it makes me think, okay, these are easy things to kind of understand when you talk about them, but they're really difficult things to like understand implicitly, like just to be able to do it without thinking, you know?
It's very hard.
Yeah. And if you are trying to think about, okay, what is the difference between the past perfect and the present perfect? Which one should I use right now? If you're trying to think about that during conversation, even if you have a good idea of the differences, if you're not 100% like just 100% certain, and if you don't have a direct intuition, you're probably going to mess it up in conversation.
Yeah, that's why mo- I stick with the past perfect. Yes,
Uh-huh.
I stick with the past perfect, but I like to use the past continuous a lot as well because I'm never done with things sometimes, so it's a current thing on my life.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier when you choose like two favorite ones and really study these ones and forget about the rest. I mean, if you are comfortable with this, that's it.
Yeah. So, my two big takeaways. Number one, you really have to think about what are your goals and do these serve your goals. So, this is a very advanced grammar point. So, if you want to speak English perfectly and make no mistakes, then it's probably worth your time sitting down, writing down hundreds of examples of the past perfect, of the present perfect, thinking about the differences and training that until it's just totally normal for you.
Yeah.
But for most of our listeners, honestly, I would say it's probably not worth it to get to that level. With that said, if you want to train this and get better, my advice is to train more and to think less. So if you train for hours and hours just using examples of the present perfect and the past perfect, that will start to be integrated into your conversation. But when you're having conversations, you can't really think about it because it's just too much information in your head.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm
Does that
I'm
make
I'm
sense?
confused right now. Imagine if I was really studying.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's obvious just from Alexia's reaction that these are very detailed, advanced points. So in most cases, I would probably say something that's kind of controversial, but I would say don't worry about it too much. And it's not going to be a big deal.
Yeah,
But
I'm thinking about the examples that you gave. Like, how would I say, right, if I was trying to think really fast and not making any mistakes? So, like, are you ready for the test tomorrow, Alexia? I would answer, yeah, I studied a lot. That's it.
exactly. And I think most people, and I'm assuming Lisiani as well, most people really admire your level of English and they want to have the same level of English as you. And Alexia has no idea about these things.
No
So,
idea. It was horrible. That's why I failed my, como é que era? CAE? C. It was one of the tests in the English test that I tried to do, but to be honest, I was so confused about it, and they did take a lot of effort trying to make us understand grammar. Because for me, I mean, if you are comfortable with what you have right now, that's fine. Of course, it depends on your reality with English. Like if you need to be more eloquent, if you need to be more formal, if you need to be more something else because of your profession, because of your relatives, whatever, that's fine. But if you are normal people just like me, I mean, just stick with what you're comfortable with.
yeah, I don't think that means you should not like push your limits and
No,
try to
of course
improve.
not.
But as you become more advanced in any language or any skill, it takes a lot more time and effort to make small improvements. So it's going to take you a lot of time to perfectly use the present perfect and the past perfect without thinking about it. That's going to require a lot of time and effort. And most people aren't really going to notice a huge change in your English. So, something to consider. Probably not the best advice, but it's my honest advice.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Lisiani, for the wonderful question. We are not grammarians. We don't love grammar, but we are always more than happy to take a shot at a grammar question.
Of course, and we are here to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisiani. Thank you, Alexia. We will see you guys in another Ask Me Anything soon.
Bye.